I have the opportunity of guiding you in this webinar series that we're going to do about this interesting topic of reusing dredge material. We're going to have three very interesting sessions beginning today. Today we will have a very rich agenda. Before the agenda, I'm going to mention just some very practical recommendations so that we do this session quickly and the internet works properly for everyone. We recommend closing the microphones and cameras throughout the whole event. We're going to have some interactive sessions which will allow us to relate with each other, and you can give your inputs and share your ideas. We're going to use this afterwards with some interactive tools. And we're also going to have a Q&A session at the end of the session and at the end of each session. So we're going to have the possibility of interacting. For those who need simultaneous interpreting, we have this service enabled. You can find this in an icon at the lower part of your screen, which says interpreting. When you click there, you can choose the language that you want to listen to. We have some participants who speak English, so I will mention this recommendation for them right now.
Today we have, me salí, ¿me escuchan?
Sí.
Sí, te estamos oyendo bien.
Sí, sí, te estamos escuchando.
Ok, algo pasó con mi computador, perdón. So for our guests that are in the Netherlands and that are English speakers, please be aware that in case that you need interpretation, there's an icon at the end of this of your screen, and you can click it over there in order to have a simultaneous translation that we have arranged for you in this session. De esta manera, entonces, quisiera presentarles la agenda.
In this way, I would like to introduce today's agenda. We have some opening words from the Vice Minister Olga Lucia Ramirez, Vice Minister of Infrastructure and Transportation. We have welcoming words from the Netherlands Ambassador, Mr. Ernst Norman, and we have some welcoming words from the National Planning Department as well. We also have the participation of two main panelists, Giovanni from the Transportation Ministry of Transport and Peter de Boer, who works for the Infrastructure Agency and Water Agency of the Netherlands. Then we're going to have a Q&A session moderated by Maria Camila Ceres, Director of Foreign Affairs of the Ministry of Transportation. We're going to have a closure of the event. So we're going to have an interesting 2-hour-long session. So without further ado, I give the floor to the Vice Minister Olga Lucia so that she can say her welcoming words. Okay, good morning, everybody. We have a big audience. Alexandra, thank you very much. Ambassador Ernst, thank you very much. And to today's speakers. I don't know how to pronounce it, but who's going to be with us with all your expertise. Thank you for this joint work, and thank you for all the support that you've given us. And to everybody else, to the ports, to peers from the Ministry of Transportation, the Environmental Ministry as well, it's very important. All of us who are connected here today to this webinar are aware of the importance of the port sector in the country. In many settings, many of us have said this, and the ports go beyond being the gateway for basic products for the growth of the productive sector in Colombia. We all know that the ports are a key point of connectivity point to join the country with the rest of the world. So we reiterate that during the pandemic, this difficult times that we are living right now, we have been always active, following strict biosafety protocols and innovating permanently to increase activity in the midst of all these exceptional circumstances that we have experienced. We know the challenging times ahead. The challenge for ports is going to be more demanding each time. Almost 90% of imports go through these areas, exports and exports go through these areas. So that's why we need spaces like this. We need to keep on working to have the best technological standards and support the areas that need to be strengthened to be able to improve their competitiveness. One of those fields which is necessary to strengthen is precisely access to the 9 port areas that we have in the country. And precisely this is the subject that brings us together today. A little bit of background: since 2016, under the support of the Ministry of Transportation, Environmental and Sustainable Development Ministry, the National Planning Department, we had an agreement, a cooperation agreement with the Economic Affairs Ministry of the Netherlands. This relationship has been ongoing for a long time, and we continue to strengthen it. And this allowed us to develop the National Dredging Plan in Colombia. This study was done by Arcadis Netherlands and SICA, and it has a series of recommendations focused on improving the port areas of the country. One of the recommendations is the use of the extracted material from the dredged areas. Alexandra was with me in a meeting, I think, a while ago, where we heard about the perception that the Netherlands has with regards to this material. And we need to head in that direction. It's material that could be useful, and we need to use it in the most efficient way possible, which is the idea, to see how we can use this material. Right now, only the private sector has been reusing the dredged material for recovering land and to landfills in the ports, in the public access canals. This materials are still being disposed of in the ocean in areas designed by the environmental authorities. Now, with the recommendation of the plans, we want to massify in all the areas the best practices in this matter in the international level, to be able to use this material better and to be able to have greater competitiveness as well. These recommendations are gathered in 5 main topics. The first one is normativity. Second, characterization of the dredged material. Third, reuse of this material with a circular economy vision. Fourth, guidelines for use and training. And fifth, institutional strengthening and identifying all the actors or stakeholders. This is a process that involves many stakeholders, and that's why we have such a huge amount of people right now connected with us. So that's why I tell you to embrace these recommendations, to study them, and to apply them quickly, taking advantage of the material that we use in dredging operations. We win as company, sector, and country. So we need to have clarity of what can be done and be able to do this quickly. Finally, I want to tell you that the port sector has a responsibility right now and in the future of guaranteeing the entry and exit of great deal of the commerce of the country. We are working to bring more tools to do this better. So with everyone's commitment, we will continue contributing with the growth and reactivation of the country. And I want to close by inviting all of you to use this in the best way possible. Like I said, this National Maritime Dredging Plan is a tool that will bring us more competitiveness in the sector and therefore for the country. So this is very important, especially where right now we have to reactivate the nation's economy, and everybody needs to contribute from our own position. I'm convinced that the port sector has a clear commitment with the country. That it has showed this in this month, and I invite you to continue working together so that it continues to be so in the future. Once again, I thank all the entities involved, and especially the Netherlands Embassy. Thank you, and here we will see how the presentation goes. Thank you, Vice Minister, for these very interesting words. I hand the floor over to Mr. Juan Felipe Vallejo, Subdirector of Transportation of the National Planning Department. Juan Felipe.
Muchas gracias, Alexandra.
Thank you very much, Alexandra. Welcome
Señor embajador, un saludo muy
Mr.
especial también para
Ambassador,
usted, señora
and special
viceministra,
welcome for you,
y
Ms.
para
Vice
todos los
Minister,
miembros de
and
los
for
equipos del
all
Ministerio de
the
Transporte, del
members
Departamento
of
Nacional de
the
Planeación
Transportation Ministry
y de la
teams,
Embajada del Reino de
National
los
Planning
Países Bajos que
Department,
hicieron
and to the
posible
Netherlands
que se
Embassy,
realizara
which
este
made
webinar y por
this
supuesto para
webinar
todos los
possible,
participantes y
and of course
panelistas del
for
día de
all
hoy.
the participants and panelists of today.
Nuestra relación como país
Our
con el
relationship
Reino
as
de
a
los Países
country
Bajos
with the
viene ya de hace
Netherlands
bastantes años. En el
has
2011,
existed for many
cuando
years. In
estábamos
2011,
sufriendo el
when we
fenómeno de la
were
niña,
suffering
se
from
llevó a cabo
the La
el
Niña
memorando
phenomenon,
de entendimiento con los
we
Países
did the
Bajos, que
memorandum of
luego en
understanding with the
2015
Netherlands, and then in the
se
2015,
extendió
this was
e incluyó
extended,
temas de
and it
transporte y de dragados
included
específicamente.
transportation and
Y fue en el
dredging
marco de
topics
este
specifically,
memorando
and
de
in the framework
entendimiento
of this
que se
memorandum
hicieron
of
documentos de
understanding,
política pública
we
tan
did
importantes
public
para el
policy
país como el
documents which
Plan
were very important for
Maestro
documents such as the
Fluvial o el Plan Maestro de
Riverine
Erosión
Master
Costera.
Plan
Y por
and the
supuesto, obviamente,
Riverine
también
Coastal
nuestro
Plan,
Plan Nacional
and
de
also
Dragados
our
Marítimos, cuya
national
recomendación que se
maritime
terminó en
dredging plan.
2017, y una de cuyas
This was
recomendaciones
done in
fue
2017, and there
justamente
was one of the recommendations was
aprovechar
to
esos
use
materiales de ese dragado de una
those
forma mucho más
materials,
eficiente.
these dredge materials in a more
Y
efficient way.
esa necesidad es muy importante en un país como
This need is
Colombia, que
very important in a country
justamente
such as Colombia,
tiene
which
tantas
precisely
necesidades en
has
términos de
so
dragado.
many needs in
Porque
terms of
como
dredging.
seguramente todos los que están
Because
aquí
as
saben, pues
many of you
muchos de nuestros
probably
puertos
know, many
han
of our
venido teniendo
ports
esa necesidad
have been
constante de
having that
dragado
constant
rutinario,
need,
y también se vienen grandes apuestas en temas de dragados
and
de profundización como el de
we
Buenaventura.
have
Así que en un país como
huge
el
bets
nuestro, que
in
está
dredging
dragando
in
tanto y que
ports
va a
such as
seguir dragando
Buenaventura.
tanto,
So
es
in a
muy
country such as ours,
importante este
dredging is
tema
going
que
to be
hoy nos
very
convoca,
important.
que
This
es el
subject is very
reuso
important, which is
eficiente
the
de esos materiales
reuse
provenientes de
of
los dragados.
materials which come from
Y
dredging.
creo que en este tema pues, no hay
And I
nadie más
think that
experto en
right
el
now
mundo
there's nobody more expert
que
in
el
the
Reino de los
world
Países Bajos.
than
Todos
the
conocemos
Netherlands.
esa gran experiencia que tiene los Países Bajos en la reutilización de
So
los
we have
materiales
that
de
great
sus dragados,
experience
y creo que
of the
eso puede ser una
Netherlands
gran
with the reuse
potencialidad
of the
para
dredge
nuestro
materials,
país,
and I think that
por
this
lo que ya
could
les dije,
be
por
very
toda
good
esa
for our country
cantidad
because
de
of what I already
material
mentioned, because of
dragado que
all
vamos a
that
tener en los
huge
próximos años y que
amount
hemos
of
venido
dredge
teniendo en los
material that we're
últimos
going to
años.
have in the following
Así
years.
que,
So
pues estos webinars creo que son
these
un paso muy
webinars, I
importante
think, are a very important
hacia
step
esa reutilización
towards
eficiente
that
de ese material
efficient
dragado,
reuse of the
pero
dredged
sin duda
material.
seguirán muchos pasos
Without a
más,
doubt,
y con toda seguridad con el apoyo de ustedes, del Reino de los Países Bajos,
we will
embajador del
count
país que
with
usted
your
representa el
support
día
with
de
the
hoy,
Netherlands, with the ambassador of the
y
country
con
that
el
you're
resto de las
representing
entidades
today,
del
and with the
gobierno que
rest
también
of
han
the
sido muy
government entities
importantes para estos
which have
webinars, como
also
el
been
Ministerio de
very
Ambiente,
important for
el de
this
Minas,
webinar,
el de
such as
Defensa,
the
y por supuesto también
environmental
las entidades
ministry, the
privadas que van a
mining ministry,
participar
and
de
all the
estos
private
3 días
entities
de
which are
conversaciones
going
que vamos a tener
to
en torno a este tema tan
participate.
importante. Seguro con el apoyo de todos
With the support of
podremos
everybody, we
lograr ese
will
objetivo de
surely
país.
be able to
Y este
achieve
es
this
un objetivo de
country
país que
objective, and
además
this
que
country
viene de
objective,
nuestro Plan Nacional de Dragados Marítimos,
which comes
también
from
quedó
our National
consignado en
Maritime
nuestro
Dredging
Plan
Plan,
Nacional de Desarrollo,
as
que
stated in our
específicamente hace
National
alusión
Development
a
Plan,
la
which
importancia
states
de
specifically,
implementar ese Plan
talks
Nacional de
specifically about the
Dragados
importance
Marítimos,
about
y
implementing
específicamente en el
this
tema
National Maritime Dredging
de reuso
Plan,
de materiales
and
dragados.
specifically in the
Y lo mismo
reuse of
ocurre con la
dredged
Política
material. The
Nacional
same thing
Logística
happens with the National Logistic
que
Policy,
salió este año,
which was issued
y que
this year,
también hace
and
alusión
which
específicamente a la
also talks
importancia
specifically
de tener en
about
cuenta la reutilización de esos
taking into
materiales
account the
dragados
reuse of
para
this dredged
una mayor
material
eficiencia
in order
en
to have
términos no
greater
solamente
efficiency,
ambientales, que
not
es
only
muy
in
importante,
environmental
sino
terms,
también
which
en
is very
términos
important, but also
incluso económicos para nuestros
even in
puertos y para nuestro
economic
país.
terms for ports and for
Así
our
que,
country. Juan Felipe, one small remark, if you could change your interpreting mode to Spanish, because they're listening to you both in English and in Spanish. Something's going on with your icon. If you could please move it to Spanish. Sorry for the interruption. There? I think that's okay now. Okay, so most of you lost or missed the majority of my speech. I'm sorry I hadn't selected interpreting mode properly, but I greet you once again. And just to finish, I want to invite all of you here to participate actively in this webinar and the 2 webinars that we have in the future. The entity that I represent, the National Planning Department, will moderate. And I believe that this is a very important first step, or an important step that we will need to take many more with the support of everybody here and with the support of the Netherlands and of all the private entities which are going to be with us in this session, and on the other peers as well from the government team and the national government team. So thank you very much, and I hope that this that takes place because of this important alliance between the entities and the Netherlands is very fruitful for everybody, for the country, and for all of us who are here. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Juan Felipe, for your words and for being here with us. So now I welcome the ambassador from the Netherlands, Mr. Ernst Norman, ambassador. Thank you, Alexandra, for handing the floor over to me. And I use this opportunity to greet Ms. Olga Lucia Ramirez, Vice Minister of Infrastructure, and also Felipe Vallejo Bejarano, Subdirector of the National Transportation Department, who are with me today in this short welcoming words. Warm greeting to the participants in this session. There are like 100 participants. It's a good participation to the professionals of the port sector and infrastructure, and to the business people who are here right now. It's a pleasure for me to be with you virtually, having the opportunity of using the technological tools to be able to improve our bilateral relations. Of course, face-to-face meetings are irreplaceable, and therefore I hope that in the future we can meet face-to-face. I arrived to Colombia 3 weeks ago, and I'm still beginning to explore the country and the city of Bogota. I already participated in the ciclovia, which I really liked. For sure, I will be able to go to other countries and other corners of the country with the purpose of using all this richness in terms of biodiversity, nature, and cultural diversity, which I know Colombia has to offer. I am sure that in the following 4 years, I will be able to use my stay in Colombia to its best and contribute to sustainable development. So that's why I'm very excited to be able to inaugurate this webinar series about the use of dredged material, a topic in which my country has great expertise with innovative developments and with a lot of attention towards sustainability and towards growth. The concept of circular economy has become essential as well in this sector. Colombia has the first circular economy strategy in Latin America, and in the Netherlands, we have defined the ambitious goal of having circular economy in 2050. And this is a transverse goal to all the sectors of our economy. This is how our ports are committed with sustainable growth as a strategy to remain competitive. The dredging activities also contribute to the conception of a circular economy, because it's precisely about giving a productive use to a material that could be treated as a worthless residue. And the same way, this productive use can be internalized within the business models, making the activity of dredging more cost efficient. A key topic in circular economy is the collaboration between private, public, and academic entities. These stakeholders need, among other things, because circular economy is all about improving the relationships in all the chain of a product. That's why I believe that it's so important to be in this webinar today with private and public stakeholders to collaborate together hand in hand. Due to safety, Peter de Boer from the Infrastructure Agency and Water Agency in the Netherlands, he will give a lot more details about our experience and about how in the Netherlands I should say the Kingdom of the Netherlands, it's formally more correct. We have promoted the use of the sands that are obtained from our dredging activities. For example, beach nourishment, among other things as well. I would like to thank the government of Colombia for allowing us to be part of this discussion in politics and to contribute with some key ideas as well. We have worked together in the past in developing the National Maritime Dredging Plan, which was finished in 2017. Now I understand that you're renewing the port policy in the country. And this webinar series will be an important input for the future planning of the sector. I would like to wish you a lot of luck in these fruitful presentations today and in the following webinar sessions as well, which we will have in October 27th and November 11th. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your words, and thank you to our three guests for this important words. You are giving us a guideline about the importance for the Colombian national government, and of course the Netherlands government as well. And it gives us a feeling of the importance and of the greatness and the value of the opportunity that all of us who work in the sector have to use this topic and dive deeper in it. Before moving forward with the presentations of our panelists, of our main panelists today, we would like to begin with an interactive session with our guests. So for this, we're going to use a collaborative tool which is called Mentimeter. So I will ask Rose to please share your screen in order to show all of our guests and to give some recommendations. Please take your cell phones and scan the QR code that you're seeing on your screens right now. If you cannot do this, I invite you to go to a search engine and go to www.menti.com. There you'll be able to introduce this code, which is in your screen as well, 1455295. So I invite you right now to do this. Let's take our cell phones. Some of you can use your camera and take a picture of the QR code, and with this you will be redirected immediately to a web page. If you cannot do this, you can select your search engine of choice and enter www.menti.com. There you can introduce the code 1455295. Okay, so the question we have right now to begin to awaken your interest is, did you know that Colombia has a national maritime dredging plan? Here we have a very good response. So we have 33 people who have given a positive response. The number is rising. The number of positive responses is rising, and some still don't know about this. So it's going to be very interesting for those who don't know it, and for those who do and who want to dive deeper in this topic. The next panelist presentation is going to be very interesting. So I would like to introduce Hector Giovanni Paez. He is an advisor of the Vice Ministry of Infrastructure of the Transportation Ministry. He is a consultant in mobility and urban transportation. He was an advisor of the National Planning Department between 2009-2020. He has participated in technical teams to formulate public policies related to transportation means in the country, riverine, railway transportation as well as the follow-up of the processes of which have been executed. Giovanni is a civil engineer of the National University of Colombia. He has postgraduate studies in economics in the Andes University. And I have the pleasure of handing the floor over to Giovanni Paz.
Thank you, Alexandra, and good morning to all, with a special greeting to Mr. Ambassador and the Vice Minister of Infrastructure and all the teams of the port sector and the infrastructure sector in Colombia and all the people that are attending today. I want to thank you for this company, the support that you have given us. The government of the Netherlands, thank you for this cooperation, as you heard in the introductory words of the previous presentation. This is a collaboration that has added value, especially because of all the time that we have developed it. And we can say that the National Dredging Plan is just one of the part where the Netherlands has had enormous cooperation. There are many things that behind the scenes are there, but we cannot see it in every event. But we do have a very strong and special relationship. And as you have seen, this plan was formulated many years ago. And to this date, we still have many challenges, many conclusions, and many points with which we have been able to start to design a roadmap for the development of this infrastructure. Precisely from that analysis that was initially done with the support of the Netherlands and the transportation sector in Colombia, we started to establish the need not only of having a development and infrastructure that was robust enough for the country, but for the good practices with the development of new methodologies and technology, so that we can take advantage of the studies, the development of the proposals that from the maritime and river sector we can have. So for the purposes of a better network, I will stop my camera. But I will start my presentation that both the National Planning Department and Mr. Ambassador and the Vice Minister were mentioning. From 2011, we have had a memorandum of understanding with the Netherlands to give aid and cooperation, mainly in the fields of water, coastal erosion, transportation, and river logistics for dredging operations. The National Development Plan has been preserved as a government policy in the transportation area to establish a national dredging plan that includes the environmental sustainability, that includes all the regulatory technical aspects that it has to go through. And the national plan and the national maritime dredging plan from 2016 and 2017, with the initiative of this MOU between the two governments, both Colombia and the Netherlands. The National Maritime Dredging Plan is based on the identification of the 9 port areas in Colombia. The dredging activities are in charge of the public and private sector, depending, of course, on the area and the infrastructure on the competitions. The main port areas in Colombia, you already know these, are located, as you can see on this map, from the bottom to the top: San Andrés and Providencia, the Guajira, Santa Marta, including the Ciénaga, Barranquilla, Cartagena, the Gulf of Morrosquillo, Urabá, Buenaventura, and the Port of Tumaco. Just to clarify, the main access canal is the responsibility in charge of the public sector of the nation. In this case, the National Transportation Aid, and the secondary canal access and the maneuver access for ships. What do we intend, or what do we want to do when we plan this National Maritime Dredging Plan? Through the National Development Plan, we want to strengthen the competitive concession of international trade in Colombia. This with the purpose of having better access to the different maritime port zones, considering that in Colombia and the Caribbean and the Pacific has a lot of sedimentation activity, and that somehow that has been one of the main challenges for access canals in charge of the public sector. As specific objectives, the idea is the development of an efficient strategy that can have a profile so that the dredging can be timely, and we will see what that means. On the other hand, the idea is to have a firm decision of the use of the dredging material, the funding for these systems, new ways of hiring, and the government's an authority for it. And on the other hand, the idea is to anticipate the economic growth of these ports in Colombia based on the maritime traffic, and with that purpose or with these tools to be able to have a solid strategy can allow us to determine when exactly do we require the enhancement, maintenance, and others of these access canals, so that we can foresee that we can depend not only on variations of the tides, the climate, and other external factors. So this should be done proactively and not reactively when we need to dredge, when we need to correct any failures or any negative operation in different port areas. On this graph, you are able to see the costs of dredging in Colombia, depending on the distances where we need to take this dredged material. In green, we can see the green bars, the distance from the buoys, and in the blue bars, the distance from center to center. And this is just to have a comparison. As you can appreciate, for the area of San Andres in comparison, for example, with Cartagena, there is a difference of approximately between 5 and 6 times more. And what does this mean? According to the experience of the Netherlands, for every 5 kilometers of transportation of material in a hopper material for remote disposal, the cost of dredging can be increased in $1 per cubic meter for every 5 kilometers. This shows that in port areas, this dredged material is deposited outside as what is considered the ocean buoy in areas considered by the corresponding environmental area. So it's not only what to do with the material, but the costs involved in the transported material. So the cost of the dredged material is not limited only to the extraction, but to transportation and disposal in an area that is important. Distance, sorry. What has happened recently in an experience for the case of Colombia with use or reuse with the dredge material in Colombia? We have certain examples. Palermo and Barranquilla, we use part of the material in filling in patios and hard zones. The Riverport terminal in Barranquilla, the same thing. And in the Cascajal Island in the Pacific of Colombia and Buenaventura, a use that was given, part of the material was hydraulic refill that was used in the construction of a park called Nestor Urbano Tenorio. These are some of the experiences we have at median scale. At the container terminal in Cartagena for storage patios in the Port Society in Cartagena, in the city of Cartagena as well, the Crespo Road, it's a young work. It's one of the best advantages of this material because we used hydraulic refill of 1.2 million cubic meters so that we could enhance the beaches, and this is very attractive, and it made this one of the safest areas against flooding in this area of Cartagena. In Arauca, for the urban area, we used this was 34 years ago. We used 3.5 million cubic meters of dredged material. But this was material from the Arauca River basin. This was for the control of flooding. And this was used in an area that is currently totally urban. It is an area that enhanced or grew the river. So the Crespo Malecon has uses not only to enhance the area, but so that this area can be inhabited, and this is an important use. Barranca Bermeja, the river terminal in the northeast of Colombia, the Impala terminal on the cross of the Magdalena River, we were able to obtain 1 million cubic meters of filling material. We we did hydraulic filling with the material of the river to be able to conform patios of the Impala River, both in the south and the north part of the river, where we were able to increase the initial area by 30%. And what do we have here? I'm not going to stop so that I don't confuse you, but this structure for the procedures for the disposition of dredge material is a scheme that would allow us to have indicators, example indicators or type indicators, to be able to identify which would be our alternatives. To the left, the darker gray, we can see that the first option is to dispose it outside in the ocean. The National Environmental License authorities and DMAR, the Colombian Maritime Authority, authorizes disposal in the established zone, so many kilometers outside in the ocean. And on the other hand, what we intend to do with this initiative is to take advantage of the dredged material for beneficial uses, and we would have three different possibilities: public, social, or environmental uses, or commercial exploitation. For each one of these phases or these alternatives, we would have minimal requirements by the authorities, certain procedures. So those that want to use this material need to comply with these requirements. For this case, we would have two main authorities, not only the National Environmental License Authorities, or CAR, the regional authorities, and the participation of the municipality, depending on what the regulations specify, or the territorial organization entities. And on the other hand, we would have the approval of the Mines and Energy Ministry in case of the requirements of the exploitation and trading conditions of the materials. This has a very important level of detail when we use river material, as we saw a couple of slides ago with the Magdalena River material. These would be the two roads. The second one has much more demanding steps, but we need to have enough approval. We need to have quality of material that is resistant enough and high enough so that it can be used in terms of safety. Now, what have we identified? What was identified during these last 4 years in terms of the National Maritime Dredging Plan in the reuse of material? First, that we don't have specific regulation to classify this type of dredged material, and on the other hand, that we don't have specific studies to classify these sediments in the more relevant places. In other words, in those where we have larger amount of material, where we would require reuse of that material, and in fact, in the areas of disposal. That classification is a starting point that is fundamental. On the other hand, the environmental legislation so far does not consider or does not have specific criteria to determine the quality of the maritime sediments. For this case, we don't have a classification or a characterization that can allow us to have limitations when we consider the reuse of that material, to be able to know which ones meet these levels of quality and which don't. And on the other hand, we don't have enough investigation or research labs, and that has limited having studies, models, and permanent simulations for the behavior of the access canals. And this refers to what we were mentioning at the beginning of our presentation, when we were mentioning of using the materials in a preventing manner and not a reactive manner. This would allow us to anticipate to what would be those virtues in the reuse of dredged material. So, based on these bottlenecks, we know the challenges that we are facing. I will try to go by this very quickly because these are preliminary diagnoses, and the potential use in these areas for San Andres and Providencia. First approximation that we had was that the material has sand and coral rock because of the place where San Andres, Providencia, and Santa Catalina are. We have problems of coastal erosion, and the reuse of the material could be advantageous. But we need to deepen this research. This material is very expensive in this island. As I explained in the beginning, the cost of dredging, not only the material itself in terms of volume, but the transportation because of the distance, which is a determining factor. For this case, we have the possibility or the challenge of storing this dredge material to generate certain costs. For La Guajira, we're talking of Puerto Bolívar and Puerto Brisa. These ports you probably know. We mainly have fine sands and silts, and the disposal zone has not so high cost in terms of transportation because this area is relatively close to the dredging zone. The reuse of this type of material, however, can be more expensive because of how close the disposal zone is. But we need to verify the feasibility of the reuse of this material for capital dredges, because this type of materials does not have such a high probability as the one we are seeing in terms of reuse for the case of San Andres and Providencia. In Santa Marta, including the port of Ciénaga, we don't have dredges programmed in a permanent manner. These are one of the public access canals that doesn't have dredges in the same times. In La Ciénaga, we have sands and silts, and this dredge is done directly by the private sector, and its reuse would possibly be more expensive due to how close this disposal area is. However, just like in the previous zone of La Guajira, we need to verify the feasibility of the reuse of this material for dredging. For Barranquilla, we have a different type of material, from fine silt sands, from fine to thicker type sands, approximately 2 kilometers. And we have rocky areas, and there are several developments classified as industrial, urban, ecological, as some of the examples we already saw where this material is used. And we need to investigate on the integration of these developments. When we're using material that is closer to this rocky material, it's material that is much more resistant. But in terms of granulometry and adapting the use of one material or another, we need to develop research that is deep enough so that we know that it will have development as efficient as the one used in the past. And what was used in the past? Smaller areas of refill. Some of the developments of these developments that are still evolving, the idea is to look for integrality of these projects, which much more rocky material together with a finer type of material. For the case of Cartagena, we have high coastal erosion. In this case, and as many of you know, it's necessary and has been necessary to do many coastal protection projects with different techniques. This disposal area is located very far from the access canal and the terminal areas where we have required the dredge. For this case, the reuse of material has been very advantageous. There are zones of the city of Cartagena where the bay is a very few meters from the beginning of the main roads of the city, such as Avenida First, and the reuse of these materials has given disposal of areas for protection and has allowed improving its defense. For this case, we need to research on the integration of the investment of these areas for protection for the dredges and capital dredges, those for deepening and maintenance. There are other areas in the bay, low level in the bay, that could be re-enhanced to be able to be used in urban, industrial, ecologic development areas, such as has been required in the bay. In Buenaventura, we're talking about the Colombian Pacific area. We have very fine sands. We also have middle-sized sands in the external bay where the Dagua River
denominada la limolita.
comes out. There is a consolidated silt stone and in the main access canal. For this case, we know that Buenaventura needs greater surface for the urban and industrial development. A couple of years ago, we did a proposal for the Center of Economic Activities in Buenaventura. This required an existing area and improving it. And one of the possibilities was doing it with this reused material. We believe that this is one of the areas where we need to focus our research combined with the capital dredge or the deepening dredge, which is one of the big challenges that the national government has been working on, as well as the recovery of lands to take better advantage of this, not only in the port area, but in different economic activities that depend not only on the port for industrial, social, and economic development of Buenaventura. And Tumaco, to the south in the Pacific coast, in this case, we have fine sands like Buenaventura, and these could be used as refill material, as happened in Cascajal and Buenaventura. But we need to analyze the possibility that this dredge material can be used to increase the level of the land and to protect it against eventual tsunamis. That, as you well know, the Pacific coast is the one that has higher possibilities or probabilities, especially in these last few years. So this is like an X-ray of what we could consider possibilities or challenges that we have identified in the different port zones. Now, the analysis of the international comparison, what we could establish thanks to the cooperation with the Kingdom of the Netherlands, evaluating other international experiences in the case of Colombia, these lead us to having these preliminary conclusions. The construction with this type of material saves costs because we don't need to buy new raw materials. And of course, we reduce transportation expenses of these materials. Transportation in acquiring material or material bought from deposits. There's an high environmental benefit because we preserve the impact in the landscape because we need less number of storage deposits and we don't need to access open pit quarries, and that somehow has generated a very high environmental impact, and not to mention illegal mining. The maintenance of canals produces in its initial stages very fine material, the first material that appears where the capital dredge has high content of dense clay and sand. So we would take advantage of this first layer of this type of material that is finer. The relocation of this material is done by dispersion of sediments in maritime zones that are close to access canals. And a significant part, an important part of these sediments is naturally returned to the coastal system as this is the re-dredged, the mechanism of the dredge material. On the other hand, the extraction of sand, we can say, is under discussion due to the large amount of sand necessary for the natural system. Sometimes we don't consider the optimal amount, or if we have much more or lower amount. So in this case, we would optimize this amount. Another one is that the dredge material could be reused for construction, as the examples we saw. 2, it can be dispersed in specific places in the ocean. 3, it can be temporarily stored. Or 4, in case it is not contaminated. In case it is contaminated, it can be treated with certain chemical treatment mechanisms or taken to a certified disposal area. So we have many possibilities to manage this type of materials, and we have many alternatives to be able to treat it, to be able to effectively reuse it. And finally, if the material is treatable to an acceptable quality, this material can be used as construction material, and in terms of scale economy, can save costs significantly. So this way, and for the time being, we can have conclusions in terms of that international comparison, that as we were mentioning, combining these big issues with the international comparison. We know that there's an absence in Colombia of specific legislation for disposal of this material, and that can be explained by these international policies that we have had in the last decades. All the countries that we studied have signed an international environmental agreement, but Colombia has not participated from these types of agreements. And we think it is necessary to be able to assess these scenarios. On the other hand, we need to participate from these agreements with an incentive that countries such as Brazil, Mexico, Peru, and others did, talking about countries in the region to create their own specific legislation on disposal. It's very important to have a regulatory framework, and that is one of the main challenges that we would have. And what is the benefit of having one of these regulatory frameworks? That the material could be reused in a much more efficient way within a legal framework that is pre-established, so that we can have these development projects so that the dredge material can be used in a high proportion. We need a plan to regulate this dredge material with the quality and technical regulations at a chemical level. Colombia can do it. We have the capacity of doing it, as I think we just mentioned with examples in Brazil and Peru. Internationally, the reuse of this material is still a challenge. However, Arcadi is this company has experience in the Netherlands, and to be able to adequately dispose of this type of material, the task is still complex. However, thanks to this cooperation that we had with the Netherlands, we know that we can identify what are the following steps. We have a certified experience, and we have the support of this government with which we have been able to develop these preliminary proposals during the last 4 years. And amongst the main difficulties, we have the fact that the material has to satisfy construction requirements in terms of relations of quality. There have to be projects in the area of influence where we know that the economic rationality to reuse this material will have to exist, and the supply of this material has to comply with the terms of the projects for reuse of the material in terms of certifications of quality. Very quickly, and to start to close, we have a proposed methodology for the reuse of dredged material. I will tell you the main areas and then the source of this. We have material to be dredged that can be acceptable, or contaminated material. That is the first criteria to continue with this flow chart in terms of whether we do it or not. If it's acceptable, we classify the material, we discriminate the use of beneficial uses, we select the site, and depending on whether there are technical possibilities or not, we would have to go through filters of regulation, international conventions, treatment relationship to be able to define. This would be the methodology, the core methodology. And based on the proposed methodology by the Buenos Aires Technological Institute in Argentina, we would have a more complex area, but a more detailed one that is more serious. On the one hand, we have a sample of sediment, an analysis of the granulometry, and depending on whether these are thicker, greater than 95%, or with thickness lower than 95%. Then we have a chemical analysis where we have different conditions. First, that no parameter goes over this, and the second one is that one or more parameters go over a value of test, and another one is that one or more parameters go over a value of alarm. Depending on these classifications, we consider whether the material complies or does not comply with a quality criteria. We do analysis depending on whether there's a range free of disposition, basic control, exhaustive control, or special manipulation range. And depending on these classifications, we make a decision on whether the material can be disposed freely on open waters, controlled in open waters, or for confined disposal on land or water. So we could do a sort of micro control by each one of the granulometries of the material to know the final disposal that we can give it. And finally, The strategies to take advantage of the dredge material give us some recommended actions to promote and reuse this material. The first one is to control the source of emissions. Here we need to implement a legislation to be able to reduce the emissions towards the water courses to avoid this material from its birth to be contaminated, to adapt or develop a positive legislation in terms of the use of the material, not only to promote it, but to give conditions so that we can reuse this type of material. 3, to develop methodologies to assess the net benefit for the society to be able to use this dredge material, the cost benefit, develop mechanisms to do the match between the offer and the demand of dredge material, considering that it's not always possible to coordinate that opportunity so that the material can be used. And that's important in terms of savings. To have pilot projects, and I need to mention the Kingdom of the Netherlands that has already done these types of pilot projects and has given us a big hand in Colombia to be able to advance in this type of analysis. And finally, it's fundamental to communicate the results through publications, workshops, presentations, such as the one we are doing today and the 2 future webinars that we will have. This is a first important approach to identify what we have advanced this. And this is the end of my presentation. And I want to thank you all for your attention. And I insist this is a fundamental step forward in terms of socializing this. And we're illustrating the most important challenges that Colombia has. And we are sure that we're not only identifying this, but we want to continue moving forward to developing this in a very close future. Thank you all. Thank you, Giovanni, for your presentation.
Okay, sí. Realmente resumiste el Plan Nacional.
You really summarized the national dredging plan very quickly. You highlighted the challenges, the environmental challenges, normativity challenges, planning challenges, the possible uses of the dredged material. And your intervention was wonderful. Thank you very much. Before moving to Peter Boer's presentation, we want to once again use this opportunity to do an interactive session with you, with our participants. So right now we're going to ask a second question in our Mentimeter app right now. So please, everybody, go back to your cell phones and please scan the code once again, which will appear on the screen. Rose, please, if you could help me share the code for the second question. Okay. So our second question for today is, what needs to be modified to have better reuse opportunities of the dredged material in Colombia? This is an open question. Let's see, in your opinion, which are those improvements and modifications that we need to do. So we have the policy for dredged material disposal. Yes, very important. One of the points which was highlighted in the presentation from the Ministry of Transportation. Regulation, appropriate normativity, greater training of those who are dredging and for the government officials to know in where we would use this. Yes, training and the national and regional level, this is important. A clear state policy which generates the appropriate economic incentive for its development. We're having a lot of interaction with you, which I think is wonderful. This tells us that its interest is a good indication. Have labs to analyze sediments. We need to improve the study of the dredged material. Yes, this is something that's pending, something that needs to be done. We need to legislate dredging methods and final disposition of the material. I'm seeing a lot of legislation, regulation, soil characterization, the dump sites, the disposal sites, environmental legislation, very important. Distinguish between maritime and riverine dredging. This is something that we need to take into account as well, defining the allowable physical chemical limits in the case of the Magdalena River sediments. Interesting to define the use of the sediments, yeah. We have at least 29 interactions. We have mechanisms to determine the quality of the material, withholding of the source of the contaminants, creating labs for research and to see the uses of the material, identify offer and demand, or articulate offer and demand to reuse the dredge material, include land organization processes where they include the topic of the reuse of dredge material. I think it's very interesting with these questions that you have asked. I think it's going to be something very interesting to give feedback to the Peter de Boer's presentation. So I would like to introduce Peter de Boer. Peter is a senior advisor in Rijkswaterstaat, which is the infrastructure agency and water management agency in the Netherlands. It's a sort of ANI or INVIAS for us here in Colombia. That's like the most similar agencies that we have here in Colombia. He has worked in this institution since 1998. Peter nowadays works for the Technical Management and Techniques department, which is in charge of parts such as maintenance dredging in the sea or inland. Peter is an advisor in environmental aspects and regulation at the national and international level with regards to dredging and maritime construction. He participated in the renowned project Space for the Rivers, where they eliminated approximately 40 million cubic meters of sediments in the river to improve safety against floods. He also participated in the implementation of the water framework of the European Union and the framework for residues for dredging and its application in the Netherlands. He focused on quality criteria for the sediments. He is from the Utrecht University in the Netherlands. He studied physical geography. Peter, the floor is yours for your presentation.
Yes, thank you very much. I will try to share my screen. It's an honor for me to be in this webinar and to have a presentation for everybody. And I hope I will succeed in sharing my screen. Is it Alessandra? Can you see it?
Sí, lo puedo ver.
Great. Then I will press this button. Well, thank you very much. I will have a presentation on dredging and infrastructural development in the Netherlands. And well, there are two key questions all the time in thinking about sediment management, and that is if sediments are a sink or a source of contaminants. And
Peter,
yes?
Yo puedo ver tu pantalla, pero no una presentación.
Peter, I can see your screen, but I cannot see the presentation. I'm looking at your email right now.
Oh, that's not well. Then maybe because I don't know how to fix that, then maybe somebody else can start the presentation.
Super. Rose nos está ayudando.
Sí. Yes, Rose is helping us. Okay.
So let me see. Yes. Is it in? Can everybody see the screen now, Alessandra?
Sí, podemos ver tu presentación.
Okay, then I will just go on. So the next slide, please. Or do I have to do that? Yes. So a short overview of the content of my presentation. I think it's important to have a short sketch of Rijkswaterstaat and also the Netherlands, because obviously there are big differences in our two countries. Then I will show some examples of dredging projects in the Netherlands for maintenance and development of infrastructure. And I think that shows that dredging is a very important tool for water management and infrastructural development. Then I will say something about environmental aspects of the dredging and sediment management, and also how we address those aspects in the projects of Rijkswaterstaat. And I have some summarizing conclusions. So the next slide, please, you can skip that and go on. Next one, please. Well, Rijkswaterstaat is the asset manager of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water State, more or less, you could say so. And we are busy with the management of three important networks. And that's the network of the highways, the national highways, the national waterways, and also the main water system. And you see three pictures of those networks below on this picture. Next, please. The Netherlands, it's a small country compared to Colombia, and well, it has a very similar low lying as the area I saw from Google Earth in Colombia, and more than half of the country is prone to flooding from the seaside, and also a large area is prone to flooding from the rivers. And that's why also, because we took measures to have the land safe against flooding, we make dikes and things like that, and we do drainage, and therefore also the land is sinking. So the importance of flood defenses is increasing. Next one, please. And again, the next one. So where we dredge for? We dredge for navigation, of course, and especially also at sea. There's a lot of amounts of dredge material to be removed of the channels going towards the harbors of the Netherlands. And also in the small ditches, in the regional water systems, dredging is very important, because all those ditches are there for drainage, and also to make sure that we will have water tables that are below sea level, so that we can have land to live on. We dredge for an area for an average amount of 25 to 35 million cubic meters a year for those purposes. And as you can see on the small picture on the left-hand side above, the dredge material from ditches is put aside very directly to the ditch. Only when it's assessed, if it's concluded that the quality is not polluted. Next one, please. Another important reason for dredging is dredging for flood control. In the Netherlands, we decided to make efforts to keep the coastline in place, and because we have a trend of erosion, we have to do beach nourishments or foreshore nourishments that's close to the beach for about 12 million cubic meters of sand every year. And we expect that those amounts will increase in future, also because of sea level rise that is expected. Next one, please. Also in the inland of the Netherlands, we do a lot of dredging also for flood control. Because in the past, urbanization also took place in the riverbed. So you can see that in the pictures above on the left-hand side. That's close to Arnhem. There you can see that a lot of space where the water was is now also for economy, more or less, for society. And we had a near flood in 1995, and after that it was decided that we had to take measures, and then we designed a room for the river program. It was about widening the riverbed, and on the top on the right hand side, maybe you can see my cursor, there are some possibilities we studied on different project locations to make sure that the water tables would not come higher than the dike. So we could do relocation of dikes to put them more backwards, but also we did a lot of dredging and lowering of floodplains, or even lowering the riverbed. So 40 measures, we did the planning together with local authorities, and also with the public, especially the people living in close by the project area.
Fernando, creo que tienes tu micrófono prendido. ¿Lo podrías, por favor?
Fernando, please turn off your microphone.
Peter, discúlpanos, puedes continuar.
Sorry, Peter, you may continue. Your microphone is off.
Oh, excuse me. I didn't know where did you where I was finished, but in the middle you see the picture of Nijmegen above the situation before Room for the River project was executed, and below the situation after the project was done. And there you can see that we had made an extra channel, so we can make sure that during high floods the water can flow to sea on time. And on the left-hand side, this is a picture of a plan of the farmers themselves, because we there we removed the dike. We put it towards this one, and it was first it was more towards the river, and the farmers decided that they would like to build a new farm on a high elevated ground. So once every 25 years, the agricultural area will flood, but the houses will be above, will stay dry. Next one, please. Another reason for dredging is environmental reasons. Well, about 1980, we discovered that all the sediments in the Netherlands were contaminated because of the bad water quality in the past. The Netherlands, is lying in the delta of 4 international rivers: the Scheldt, the Rhine, the Ems, and the Meuse. And on all those surface waters, a lot of wastewater discharges took place. And that's why because of that, all the sediments in the river system became contaminated. So we did a lot of efforts to improve the water quality, and today we see a much better quality of sediments. So all the contaminated sediments will become kept now with more clean sediments. And well, for decision making, we checked different risk pathways. Contaminants could pollute the groundwater. It could have ecotoxic effects or pollute the surface water, or even have toxic effects on people. So those 4 risk pathways we try to assess, and based upon that we made decisions on dredging, on removing the contaminated sediments out of the water systems. But we learned that by doing that, the effect was not as we expected. Also because during dredging you will have spills. So directly after the dredging, we in most times we decreased the quality of the top layer because of the improved water quality. New sediments had a better quality than the buried sediments, but because of the dredging, also the buried sediments became the top layer. So we changed our policy for that. And today we say not the sediment quality is the starting point of risk assessments or decision making on removal of contaminated sediments from water systems, but the water quality itself. So for example, on the right hand side there's a picture of a PPP project, Markerwadden, because in one of the lakes in the Netherlands had a very poor water quality because of fine sediments that are continuously being resuspended in the water column. So we try to gather all those fines by making deep pits, for example, and also by dredging, and concentrated them in islands, wetlands, more or less, in the Lake Marken. And we did it together with Natuurmonumenten, and well, the public loved it very much. Next, please. Again, the next. Yes, legislation on dredged material developed starting about in 1970, when we had the first Water Pollution Act, and the discovery of pollution and environmental risks made it important to have a policy on how to deal with it. So the general purpose of regulations obviously has nothing to do with dredging projects, but with protection of certain fields of interest or certain sectors of the environment, like water, soil and nature, etc. And because dredging obviously has an impact on the surface water and the soils and the nature, because that's also the purpose of dredging, we have to deal with almost all environmental regulations in our projects. And that makes the projects also very complex sometimes. Next, please. So for to understand the complexity of the regulations, it's always important to know the definitions, because the definitions are also made by the definitions, the scope of the regulations become clear, and well, it makes the scope clear, and so all the other agreements or elements of the regulations are also based on that on those definitions. So very important is soil, of course, because well, that's something different in the Netherlands than sediments. So every sediment behind the dike, so where the water cannot come, is soil, and sediments on the other side of the dike we call sediments. And when we excavate soil, then we have soil, and when we excavate within the dike, so in the riverbed, then we have dredge material. So the definition of surface water body or surface water is also very important, and also waste is a very important definition. Also, especially in European Union, where we also have a European waste list, and dredge material is also on the waste list of the European Union. And, please, the next one. But since the Waste Framework Directive obviously is not really for water management, there were some exclusions of the scope made, because we didn't like to see that the European Waste Framework Directive would hamper the effectiveness of the water management. So the relocation of sediments inside of the water bodies or the surface waters is excluded from the scope in Europe of the Waste Framework Directive. Next, please. So this is a sketch of the most important regulations. I projected them on the dredging chain, which is in essence very simple. It's in the middle of the picture. It starts with sediment, then you go dredging and get dredge material. You have to transport that somewhere and put it anywhere. So in the past, especially the last option, to put it somewhere, not too many thoughts were given about that. But today you can see also in the picture that there are a lot of different options now, also because of the regulations that are relevant and have to be applied in the project. So you can see that there's also a prioritization, because for the circular economy we like to minimize disposal. So that's why we prefer the relocation, direct use, treatment, and only in the end we think about disposal. Next one, please. By making policies, obviously also costs are important, and this is a very simple picture of the costs of different options for handling the sediment. Just relocated in the surface water, of course, on the left-hand side is the most efficient and also therefore cheap. Placement on banks is a little more expensive, and if you have to like to make use of it on land, then you have to dewater it. So that will also make it a little more costly. Confined disposal is also costly, because you have to create a confined disposal site, of course, before you can do it and have to invest in that. And treatment techniques, simple treatment techniques are not much more expensive than disposing it in a confined disposal site. But then there are also very modern techniques, and well, then cost can become higher and higher. So in the Netherlands, about in the 1988, the government decided to build confined disposal sites for very contaminated dredge material. The next one, please. So this is two aerial photographs of two disposal facilities for only contaminated dredge material. So soils are not allowed to put in there. It's especially a facility for the water management. And on the left-hand side, you see a picture of the slufter. That's mainly for marine dredge materials. And on the right-hand side, you see depot IJsseloog. That's in the freshwater lake Ketel. And that's also for freshwater dredge material. And as you can see, maybe, well, it's not very good to see, but Also, some sand separation techniques were used before the dredge material was disposed in the facility, also to try to make use of the sand. But it proved to be difficult to have a buyer for our sand. So that was one of the things that we need to improve. The next one, please. So we learned, because we had a policy and we implemented it, we also learned a lot of lessons. And that is also that the key assumption for SQC, that stands for sediment quality criteria, that's a poor measure for risk or toxicity. So speciation, the mobility of the contaminants and the bioavailability, especially for ecotoxic effects, are of greater importance. But those things are difficult to assess. So if you like to have a good judgment on the environmental risks of the presence of contaminated sediments, we think it has to be done site-specific. And if possible, with different techniques like eco-surveys, chemical analysis, and bioassays altogether. So the sediment quality criteria are very easy to assess, and that's nice, and that's also why they are very important still these days. They are being used to decide if reuse is possible or not, and the standards for that are part of the Dutch soil quality decree. Yeah, and because we know that it's only a poor measure for risks, we have some precaution also in our standards. So all the standards for reuse, and they are based upon the precautionary principle, more or less. And it can also be a case-by-case decision if dredge material is a resource or a waste. So next picture, please, that will explain it, I think, in more detail. Next one, please. No, we'll have to wait for the better explanation. It will come. So after we learned those things, we made the government made a new policy note in 2005, and especially also on the management of dredge material. And I think a lot of thoughts that were on which the policy note was based were also addressed in the management plan or in the dredging plan for Colombia. So I like that plan very much. But important was that at first we had a use on treatment, but we decided that that was not so helpful. So the use of dredge material was a policy objective and not the treatment anymore. That's more something for the waste legislation. And we also think that it's not so appropriate waste legislation for dredge material, because dredge material has a very specific origin, so it's very different from other waste materials. So we think that dredge material is only waste if use in the aquatic environment or on soils is not allowed. And that fits fairly good with the exemption in the Waste Framework Directive of the European Union. Further, we think that remediation of contaminated sediments is only necessary if the water quality goals from the Water Framework Directive are not fulfilled. So in practice, we are now having a plan for reaching the Water Framework Directive by especially doing some alterations of hydromorphology of the water systems. And it's not so much focusing anymore on the quality of the sediments. Then next one, please. So this is an illustration of our sediment quality criteria, chemical standards for sediment quality, which are part of the soil quality decree. We have different classes, and the most clean class that is below a background quality that we derived from a lot of investigations all over the country. If it's below the background quality, free reuse is possible. And then also we have a class A, which is bordered by a quality of the newly formed sediments in the Rhine Delta. So because we think that's an important number, because if we clean it up better, then it will be polluted again because of the sediments coming from upstream. Then we have between the background level and we have above that an intervention level, and that's more or less distinction between hotspots and the diffuse contamination. So everything above that level, more or less, is waste, and has to be handled conforming to the waste legislation. But we also, like I said, we had a precautionary principle in setting those levels. So if site-specific arguments are there to make use of that material anyway, then there are possibilities for that too. So next one, please. And well, in practice, it is also very simple starting point of the soil quality decree. If we start excavating soils or sediments somewhere, the intention is to leave the situation in a better quality than we found it. So it's not allowed to put class B on A, but you can put class A on class B. Next one, please. And then also we have an option to make large-scale uses, like this picture showing, but well, this option is very close to disposal. And well, it's very important to have good communication with the public because otherwise it will not be understood. Next one, please. So these are also some examples of uses of constructive uses of soils and sediments in dikes and pits. And well, you can skip this one because I have to hurry a little because time is flying. Thank you. Next one, please. So in practice, also for the dredging of Rotterdam, we have some areas appointed where we can dispose of sand or clay silty dredge material. And those locations are in the coastal fundament. So we think it's also beneficial for protecting the coastline. And if it's contaminated, the material has to be disposed of in the slufter. Next one, please. So here you can see how it is going in practice. In the upper end, you can see where the dividends between marine and fluvial sediments is in Rotterdam. And then we have to do an assessment of sediment quality before dredging, of course. And then the middle section. And based upon those results, then we make pictures like the downside. And the yellow parts have to go to the slufter, and the blue parts can go to sea, can be disposed of in the coastal fundament. Next one, please. And also in the northern part of the Netherlands, we now there's also very turbid estuary, so we don't like to dispose the dredge material at sea there, and we try to make clay for dike reconstructions. Next one, please. Yes, again the next one. Thank you very much. So the working philosophy of Rijkswaterstaat, we try to do as much work with as less civil servants as possible. So we have some risk working methods, like risk management is very important to within Rijkswaterstaat, so to make sure that you do the right things. And the goal of risk management is also that it will work. So it's not something negative, thinking about risks, but it's very positive. We don't like to have surprises. So even a missing of opportunities, it's also a risk, of course, maybe the biggest risk there is. Well, risk management in practice is more or less the same as data management, because risks are more or less uncertainty. So if things are uncertain, we have to find certainty, and therefore we do gathering information, do research, and do data management. And every project phase you have to do that again, look upon your information, think about what you need, and collect that information. And also for contracting, it's also important that contractors have the same opinion on risk as the client. Next one, please. Very well. So we don't have any equipment at Rijkswaterstaat, but only more or less a procurement policy. So we are very dependent on the contracting parties and companies. And well, these are the goals of our procurement policy. And I think we can go to the next one. So there's a big trend within Rijkswaterstaat, we like to use more performance-based contracts. So we don't describe anymore how exactly the work has to be done, but we describe the result we like to see in our contracts. And also we make use of this contract for the maintenance of the fairways to the harbors of the Netherlands. And also we like to have contracts for a long period. Also contractors like that, of course, but also because it's important to gain experience in the work you do and in the area you have to do the work, so you can do it also efficiently. Next one, please. I don't know how many time I have, but this one, well, these are the steps we do before to come to a good contract in tendering. We use the tool of systems engineering to specify the results we like to see. Well, we design our control instruments, standards, all the demands we have to verify, of course. And then we need to think about methods on verification of the demand we made, or the prestation delivered by the contractor. So very important is to have area-specific information and characteristics of the functioning of the system, the water system especially, and the sedimentation rates, things like that. And also the environmental legislative demands could be translated in specifications. However, in the Netherlands, we do that seldomly because it's already in the legislation. And if we rewrite legislation in a contract, then we can have differences and problems with the contractor. Next one, please.
Peter, estás en tus últimos 5 minutos de presentación.
Yeah, I think
5 minutes.
Thank you. I think I managed. So this is a picture on systems engineering and dredging. We only specify how the system should perform, and in fact we designed a system so it will be a profile to realize, because we think shipping lane has to be that deep and that wide, and that's the functional demands for the dredging performance. So we don't specify the activities needed to make the system perform as wished. That's something for the contractor to do. But we do specify the boundary constraints for activities as far as if they're not in legislation already. Next one, please. And in our fairway process, I think the next one is better. Then I zoom in on the picture. This next slide, please. Yes. Oh, this is what I meant. Yeah. Thank you. In performance contracts, we give a lot of work to do to the contractors. So we only do some preparations, and also a lot of surveys and field investigations and soil investigations and assessments of the quality. It's all a task for the contractor. Next one, please. And yeah, this is, we can skip this because this is, then you can read what's in the circle. And also we do a lot of knowledge exchange with the sector. For example, with CEDA, that's the Central Dredging Association for Europe, and we help them also to make information papers. And I just wanted to show you that just a new paper was out on setting turbidity limits. So that's a very good framework for to think of if turbidity is a hot issue in the sediment management. Thank you. Next one, please. So in the contract management, we do that also as lean as possible. So one of the demands for our contractors is to work in accordance to a quality system, quality plan. And so he has to have a plan, and also the working processes have to be described that will deliver the products. And we can do contract management by doing audits on the plan, on the processes, and on the products. And it has to be a good mix of audits. Next one, please. So, and also for the future, we're still busy developing and improving ourselves. I'm also very interested in the experiences you will have in Colombia, but new aspects we have to integrate in the quality of the work is more or less the multifunctionality. We like that, if sediments are used for flood protection, for example, in wetland construction, then we also have not only water safety construction, but also nature or recreational values. Circular economy is important, so that's about all materials, not only about sediments, of course. And also very important, we think, is energy efficiency. Because of the Paris Agreement, we have to minimize the carbon greenhouse gases emissions. And further, also very important is adaptation to become climate resilient. And we have a Delta program studying on measures to adapt Dutch infrastructure to climate change. Next one, please. And the last one, thank you. So my conclusions for this webinar and today is that dredging is an important tool for water management, but also for infrastructural development. And it's not possible to start your dredging if you don't have a plan for the sediment management. So sediment management always has to be integrated in the dredging projects. Sediments can be used beneficially, even if they are somewhat contaminated. But I think it's, and that's also the experience within Rijkswaterstaat, that it is very important to explain and communicate about that to the public. Otherwise, protests can occur. And also, we use as Rijkswaterstaat performance-based contracts for cooperation with contractors. And we think we're very happy that the contractors are also very competent. So, and also that sediment management has to fulfill general binding rules in the Netherlands. And that's also the reason that there is no need for us to specify the sediment management in contracts. But that doesn't mean that that is not possible, of course. So if you don't have regulations, I think it's a very important aspect of the contracting and the tendering procedure. So also, last but not least, our regulatory framework has also, we are busy improving it, and we like that it starts to facilitate the development and realization of integrated plans for sustainable infrastructural development. So thank you very much. This was my presentation.
Muchas gracias, Peter, por tu presentación.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your presentation. It was very interesting. I think you gave us a lot of elements for analysis that are going to generate our session for Q&A. You mentioned Rotterdam's experience. That makes me very happy because that gives way to be able to present the moderator for our Q&A session, Maria Camila Celis, International Affairs she studied at Rotterdam, a master's in maritime law and transportation law. So Maria Camila, I welcome you for this session.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for your time.
I'm going to start my questions the opposite way, from the back to the front. And I will start with Dr. De Boer, and I will start with a question in English.
It was very enlightening for me and perhaps for all of us here in Colombia. We have several questions from our chat. So I will start selectioning some of them so you can afterwards answer it to us. The first one, which I completely loved, is how did the contractors respond to the change in tendering that you were telling us, all the mindset that you aim to change to be able to do this. So this is my first question to you. And a second question, perhaps a little bit more with a brighter scope, is that, as you mentioned in your conclusions, you were saying about the advantages of having the reused material on the sediment. However, I would like you to tell us 3 examples or 3 advantages of the reuse of the dredge material, and what happened if we in our scope, if we don't use or we don't manage these dredge material. What happened if in Colombia we decided, hypothetically speaking, not to use these reused material to dredge, just dredging like it has been doing for several years, and we don't do anything with the dredge material? So these 2 questions for you, and then I will go to Giovanni Perez to ask him some other questions in Spanish.
Okay.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Okay, I can react now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, first about the contractor's reaction. Well, I think that was a range of reactions. Especially the bigger contractors like the idea very much, because also they always told Rijkswaterstaat that they would like to be involved in the projects earlier because of their knowledge and because well, they were critical on the way we did our work. And but the smaller companies, of course, who like to know exactly what you ask and like to don't like to make plans but do the work, they were not so enthusiastic, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So, but in general, most of the dredging companies are very competent and have a lot of knowledge.
Yeah.
So especially for the dredging, I think everybody likes the idea, but we're still busy finding out how we can do it in the best way, of course.
Okay. So for everyone that's listening to me in Spanish and or English, please write your questions here on the chat box. If we don't select your questions, because there are many questions here to answer, we will send all the answers through email with the record of the session. So feel free to write to us. We'll here actually to answer all those questions. So, and
I can add something if I may. So,
yes.
Because on the first slide of my presentation, I also had a picture of the book of the dredging companies themselves. So they also like to show to the public that they are very experienced and have a lot of knowledge, and also can do a lot of work for the clients. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we could start, and just to finalize, like to wrap up this, if we could start from scratch, like Colombia has never dredged before, we're just starting our inland waterways, hypothetically speaking again. What is your suggestion or your advice for us to make these policies? And that's one question. And the other one is, how long do you think, I know you don't know our Colombian legislation, but still, how long do you think it would take us to prepare this regulation, or what are the main key issues that we need to address in our regulation to be useful, to be accurate, to respond to the needs? So these 2, and I'll let you go. I'm sorry.
Yes, because it's a very difficult question, I think, but yeah, well, very important, of course, is that's also the purpose of regulations, especially also on the European level, is to create a level playing field. And because if costs of some practices are higher than others, then then it will not work out on everywhere. So that's an important future of regulations. But you can also have, like I said, do it more project specific and have the demands in the contracts.
Thank you so much. So voy a hablar en español ahora. Giovanni.
Now I'm going to speak in Spanish. Giovanni Pais, thank you very much.
For your time.
Great.
Spanish then. Yes, good.
My
Giovanni,
pleasure.
muchas gracias por.
Giovanni, thank you very much for your presentation as well. It was very useful, and I have a lot of questions for you. And I need to select several. And I want to say that if you want to ask more questions, we will answer absolutely all of them, and we will answer them through your email through this link. So Joanny, I have the first question for you. And they are difficult. What would be the best strategy for the reuse of dredged material through an agreement, or for example with a PPP, with Dutch experts for joint work with concessioned areas or public access areas, or something completely different, individual hiring of each one of these works by volume. So what's your opinion, Giovanni? Thank you, Maria Camila. Well, for the time being, or the best tool that we could use is the first one, through an agreement where we can somehow optimize levels of service for the long term. Since the majority of us know port contracts in Colombia and in the big cities around the world where we have these types of developments, these are long-term contracts, more than 30, 40, or even more years of contracts. And in this case, it would be a mutual gain, a gain for the two parties, so that we can provide better quality in terms of depth, in terms of taking advantage of the material. And this would be a long-term policy, of course, having only those levels of services that I am talking about, but also promoting a government policy that could be replicated in the other port areas. The private sector would gain in terms of the services that it needs, and there would be more economic advantages in these concession contracts. And for the nation, it would also be very high advantage because it would have available areas for other reconcessions and for a development in terms of lands and territorial ordering plans for a long-term vision. So I think the best option is the first one, in an agreement between two parties. Giovanni, they are asking us, additional to this, how could we present proposals for the better use of dredged material at the ministry? How are we managing this internally? What is your opinion? How are we going to manage this in the future? Because this is going to be an avalanche. This exercise is placing us like, it's giving us vision. How will we do it? What we need first is to have interinstitutional articulation. From the scenario we have, the National Dredging Plan, these first advances in recognizing that it is necessary to have a framework, not only regulatory, but technical, for using these materials and thinking about the long term. It is fundamental that this work is given so that all the mechanisms and the requirements in legal terms, in environmental terms, and in technical terms can coexist the best way possible. As many of you know, we're developing a port policy, or we're updating the port policy this semester. And one of the components of this policy is the physical environmental policy. So we can identify the needs and anticipate. We need to gain time. We need to develop projects that are structured enough, that are mature enough, and these preliminary identifications have to be done in a coordinated manner. Giovanni, give me a second. I have a question that just appeared for the Dutch side.
This, what do you think it could be the economic impact of a dredging work by the use of the extracted material? Perhaps some examples from the Dutch side, perhaps some advices from the Dutch side that could help us here in Colombia, because we have these questions several times of the not just the economic impact, but also the environmental impact. You mentioned that in your presentation, so perhaps you can refrain to that and to help us again to understand and to cope with these impacts that the reuse of the dredging material could make here for us in Colombia. Mr. De Boer.
Yes, well, I think economic feasibility of dredging projects and handling of sediment is also dependent on the avoided costs, especially therefore also restrictions from environmental regulations are important, because if something is not allowed, then you have to try to find another solution. So that's also why the economic feasibility is very area specific. Also in Europe, because well, the European regulations aim at a level playing field, but well, they're also in general, so every member state can implement it in his own way. So, for example, in Belgium, they don't have disposal facilities like we invested in the Netherlands, and there they have needed another solution for the treatment for the management of the contaminated sediments, and they have a treatment plant on land, and then they make aggregates or things like that of the contaminated sediments. But it's only because they don't have another option. No problem.
Okay, which leads me to my following question: is what happens if we don't reuse the sediment material? Like you were saying in Belgium that they don't have it. What happens if we don't do it? Like, is it more costly for us? Is it more costly for us as a country, for the private sector, or it just doesn't matter? Like, taking from the side all the benefits from the environmental side, from the economic, like, what would happen?
Yes, well, I think it would be a waste also to throw things away because then you don't have any benefits of it. And well, also in the waste legislation, there are two options for waste management. One is disposal, throwing it away, and the second one is reuse. So if you can make use of it for a purpose, then you also need a purpose, of course, for the use. And then you can also have benefits for other purposes. Maybe it's not a benefit for your dredging project, but it can be a benefit for society. So it's a difficult thing, but how the more complex the management will be, also the costlier it will be, of course.
Okay, thank you. And one final question for you. I'm sorry, but this is so relevant for us, and as our Vice Minister told us before, like, we are in a very key moment. Like, we're experiencing momentum, as I say, in Colombia, to these dredging technologies, to this dredging, because we are expanding our minds and our scope to this, because the Magdalena River, all of our ports, that's what we're facing. So one final question is, do you apply, or do you suggest us to apply the eco-hydraulic criteria for the dredging projects?
Eco-hydraulic criteria. I'm not sure if I understand you correctly now.
Yeah, that's what they say. That's one of the questions. I'm gonna put it in Spanish because perhaps my translation is not that accurate. And in Spanish is se aplican criterios de.
Do you apply ecological hydraulic criteria for the dredging projects?
Yes, if necessary, but I shortly showed the picture on setting turbidity limits, but especially the water systems of the Netherlands are very shallow and also very turbid, so it's not such an important issue in the Netherlands. But it can be elsewhere on the world, of course, and further, well, the regulations and the chemical criteria are the most important indicators we use in the Netherlands. But we like to create a lot of wetlands because they're good for nature and also good for flood protection.
Okay, so are you coming here to Colombia when the pandemic goes out, and or when we find the vaccine, and to help us to do this in the future? Because we need this, we need experienced people, we need people that believes in this. So you're more than welcome. And
well, it would be my pleasure, but I think I have also a lot of colleagues who are maybe even more equipped than I am to help you with that.
The more the merrier, the more the merrier, don't worry. So thank you so much for your time here. I want you also to to join us and to be with us on the next 2 following webinars on 27th and November 11th. So to keep wrapping up this, and one final question for the Colombian side. Giovanni, una última pregunta para ti.
Giovanni, one last question for you.
A ver, es que estoy seleccionando, son muchos.
I'm selecting because we have many questions.
Me acabo de perder. Giovanni, cuéntanos un
So
poquito.
Giovanni, tell us a little bit from your experience at the ministry and everything you have been able to see from our exercises. What would be the best strategy for the reuse of dredged material? And answering the question that I had already asked you, how would you see this experience moving towards the future? Is it easy? How do you see the next few steps? And Giovanni, short because we have 4 minutes. So I will reformulate the question. What would be, Giovanni, your recommendations? 3 recommendations for the private sector and for us from the public sector for the topic of the reuse of dredged material. And I will correct, the next one is November 10th, not 11th. I was wrong. November 10th. Giovanni, we will close here and thank you all for your questions.
We will be answering by email. Vamos a contestarles a ustedes por correo todas las preguntas y vamos a enviarles la grabación como se había
We
pedido.
will send you all the recording as you had requested.
Thank you so much for having us and for helping us here at the Ministry of Transport. Giovanni, muchas gracias y feliz mañana para todos.
And we hope you all have a good morning. So there was a question for Giovanni.
Sí, así es. Muy rápidamente, tal cual como me
So
lo
very quickly, as you were saying, I think that the main challenges are focused first on the lessons learned from the cases of use applied in Colombia and based on the experience of the Dutch government and interinstitutional coordination, as I mentioned. But in terms of prioritizing the development of new technologies, we need to consider that in the development of infrastructure, we're using it in roads, in railroads, in rivers, and take advantage of these new technologies and the new materials. And the third one is looking at these topics in depth in our webinar on November 10th. How to match between the development of these projects. So Maria Camila, Giovanni, thank you all. Peter, thank you very much. Maria Camila already mentioned this. We invite you October 27th and November 10th to continue talking. The next webinar will be very interesting. We will look at the environmental side of this. We will have the participation of representatives from the Ministry of Environment in Colombia, representatives of DIMAR, and from the Netherlands, we will have a representative from the Commission of Environmental Impact Assessments. This is a key agency in all of this analysis of the reuse of dredged materials. It will be very interesting, so I invite you all. Let's continue talking, and we will see you on the 27th. A big hello to all of you, and have a good day.
Chao, muchísimas gracias.
Vale, gracias.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Hasta luego.
Gracias, hasta luego.
Gracias, hasta luego. Hasta luego.
La conexión con Felipe.
Gracias, esperamos el video.
Genial, sí, vamos a enviar el video.
We will send you all the video as well. Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, John. Have a good day. Is there a possibility of having more participants because 100 was very little, many could not attend? Yes, thank you. We're going to analyze this inside the organizing group. It's a little bit more expensive, but we are going to analyze that possibility. Alexandra, thank you very much, and thank you all, and have a good day. Juan Felipe, thank you. Thank you for being part of this avalanche, as Maria Camila mentioned. This is an avalanche of the reuse of dredge material.
Sí, José Manuel, no te escuché bien.
Jose Manuel, I couldn't listen clearly. Increase the number of participants, please. Yes, we will take note of that.
Alexandra, muchas gracias. Soy Gerardo.
Maria Alexandra, thank you very much. I'm Gerardo Vaquero. Gerardo, thank you. Thank you for your participation and support, both you as the Embassy of the Netherlands. Thank you very much. Yes, let's continue in this avalanche of the reuse of dredge materials. This will become a hashtag.
Alexandra, ¿hay alguna forma de enviar toda
Alexandra, is there any way of sending all the presentations because I lost part of it because of the limited possibilities? Is there any way of having all the presentations that we had today? Yes, of course. The technical team is reviewing how we're going to upload these videos, and we will be able to share these videos. So the idea is to share the videos and, of course, all the presentations. Perfect. Thank you.
La de derecho de los tratados sigue por esta misma presentación.
And the treaties?
La de derecho de los tratados, sí, hola Alexandra. ¿Será la de derecho de los tratados seguimos por acá, por este mismo lado?
So the following, no, that's a different meeting, right? With the ministry? If it's a different meeting, it's a different link. This was the link only for this webinar on the reuse of dredge materials. Thank you.
Gracias. Bueno.
Bueno, un saludo a todos. Último, creo que ya vamos a cerrar la sesión. Muchísimas gracias también a Lingua Viva y a todo el equipo. Y nos vemos para la próxima.
Hasta luego, Alexandra.
Muchísimas gracias. Feliz día.
Gracias, Alexandra. Feliz día. Gracias a todos.